There is a bird in your yard that has a list, not a list you can see, not one written anywhere, but a list that exists in the neural architecture of a creature that weighs less than a handful of coins, updated every single day and never forgotten. You are on that list. The question is, which side of it you're on? Welcome to Bird Sense. I've spent years watching the cardinals and chickadees in my own backyard, and the more I learned about what they're actually doing out there, the more it changed the way I see every single morning. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you look at every bird that has ever flown away from you. Today, we're going into something that science has spent decades trying to fully understand and still finds surprising. Every time the data comes in, birds remember. Not vaguely, not approximately. They remember specific faces, specific moments, specific acts of harm. And they carry that memory forward in ways that will make you reconsider every interaction you've ever had with the wildlife outside your door. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is the part researchers at Cornell didn't expect to find. And once you hear it, you won't be able to look at the birds in your yard the same way again. Number 1. The crow that recognized a mask on a university campus in Seattle. In 2006, researchers at the University of Washington conducted one of the most quietly unsettling experiments in the history of animal cognition. They walked through a crow population on the Seattle campus, wearing a specific rubber mask, a caveman face, while trapping and banding birds. The crows were stressed. They struggled. Some were held, measured, and released. And then the researchers walked away. What happened next changed what scientists thought they knew about bird memory. When researchers returned to the same campus wearing that same mask, weeks later, months later, in some cases years later, the crows remembered. They dive-bombed the mask. They mobbed it. They produced alarm calls specifically associated with that face, and no other. Crows who had never been trapped, themselves, juveniles who had not yet been born, when the original captures happened, responded to the mask with the same intensity as the birds who had been held in a researcher's hands. The memory had been passed down. A specific human face associated with a specific act of harm had become part of the cultural knowledge of that crow population in Seattle. The crows were teaching their young who to fear before those young birds had ever had a reason to fear anyone. Number 2. The blue jay that never forgot a child in a backyard in Ohio. This one didn't come from a laboratory, and honestly, it's the kind of story that stays with you. It came from a backyard in Columbus, Ohio, documented in a long-term observation submitted to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Citizen Science Program. A family had a blue jay that visited their yard every morning for 3 years. The bird was relaxed around the adults. It would land within a few feet of the woman who filled the feeder. It stayed calm when the man of the house walked past with his morning coffee. Then, one afternoon, a neighborhood child picked up a stone and threw it at the bird. The stone missed. The jay flew off. It came back the next morning, but something had changed. The bird, which had previously ignored children in the yard entirely, now produced a specific alarm call every time any child entered the yard. Not adults, not strangers, children. Specifically, the response lasted for the remaining 2 years. The family observed the bird. The jay had not generalized its fear to all humans. It had not become skittish around the people it trusted. It had updated one specific category in its threat assessment, and it had done so permanently, based on a single event that lasted less than 3 seconds. Number 3. How the memory actually works, and why it's more sophisticated than it sounds. When people hear that birds remember faces, the instinct is to reach for a simple explanation, conditioned response, associative learning, the kind of thing we understand easily: stimulus, reaction, repetition. But what researchers have found goes considerably further than that. A study published in Animal Behavior found that when crows encounter a person they have flagged as dangerous, they don't just react, they communicate. They produce calls that carry specific information about that individual, information that other crows extract and act on without ever having seen the person themselves. What this means is that bird memory is not just stored internally, it is externalized. It becomes part of the shared knowledge of a group. The researchers describe this as a form of cultural transmission of threat information. The bird doesn't just remember who heard it, it tells others, and those others tell others. And the face of the person who once threw a stone in an Ohio backyard, or startled a nest in a Tennessee garden, or reached too close to a feeder on a front porch in Michigan, that face begins to move through the local bird population, like a name on a list being passed from hand to hand. Number 4. Smaller birds remember too, and they're in your yard right now. I know most people think of memory as something only the big, dramatic animals do, but what I found when I started digging into the research on chickadees genuinely surprised me. Crows get most of the attention in this research. Their cognitive abilities are dramatic, well documented, and easy to demonstrate in controlled settings. But the memory capacity of smaller Americans, backyard birds, is more widespread than most people realize. It just expresses itself differently. Black-capped chickadees, one of the most common feeder birds across the northern United States, do not have the facial recognition capacity of corvids, but they have something else. Spatial memory so precise that a single chickadee can remember the locations of thousands of individual food caches across an area spanning several miles, updated continuously across months, with enough accuracy to recover specific seeds in specific locations weeks after hiding them. That same memory system applies to people. A chickadee does not remember your face the way a crow does, but it remembers your location, your patterns, your movements, your relationship to the space it inhabits. It knows where you stand on your back porch. It knows what time you appear at the feeder. It knows what happens when you do. And if something bad happened in a specific location associated with you, a sudden movement near the holly bush, a predator that came while you were near the feeder, a moment of fear that your presence preceded, the chickadee encodes that association with the same precision it uses to remember where it hit a sunflower seed in October. You become a landmark, and landmarks can be safe or dangerous. Number 5. What birds do when they decide you are a threat, and how long it lasts. Here is the part most people don't think about until it's already happened. If a northern cardinal or a chickadee in your yard has classified you as dangerous, the signs are not dramatic. There is no single confrontation. The bird does not attack. What happens is quieter, and in its own way, more final. The feeder empties when you step outside. Birds that were present 30 seconds ago are gone. The alarm calls go up when you appear and don't come down until you leave. And over time, if the pattern continues, the birds stop coming at all. Not all of them immediately, not all at once, but the yard goes quiet in a way that feels inexplicable until you understand what has been happening at the level of bird cognition all along. Research from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology on habituation and threat response in backyard birds shows that a negative association formed through a single, significant event can persist for an entire season. In corvids, it can persist for years. And because the information is shared socially across the American backyard bird community, reversing a bad reputation in your yard is not simply a matter of time. It is a matter of sustained, consistent, patient behavior change, visible to the birds themselves, over a period long enough for them to update what they have already decided. The good news is, they can update it. Birds that have flagged a person as dangerous will gradually reclassify them if the evidence accumulates in the other direction. If the person moves slowly, provides food consistently, and stops doing whatever triggered the fear in the first place. But it takes longer than most people expect, because the memory that formed quickly, in one moment, dissolves slowly, over many. Number 6. What this means for the birds that have already decided to trust you. I want to end with this, because it's the part that changed how I feel every single morning when I step outside and the cardinals don't move. If the birds in your American backyard are relaxed around you, if they stay when you step outside, if the feeder doesn't empty the moment you appear, if the chickadee overhead keeps foraging instead of going still, that is not a default condition. That is the result of a decision made over time based on evidence stored in a memory system we are only beginning to fully understand and shared with other birds in ways we are still mapping. The trust you have with the birds in your yard was built the same way all trust is built. Through repetition, through consistency, through showing up the same way, day after day, until whatever uncertainty existed at the beginning was slowly replaced by something the bird could count on. You did not have to do anything dramatic. You just had to not be a threat, reliably, long enough for the information to accumulate, and somewhere in the neural architecture of the creatures that visit your yard every morning, in the chickadee on the maple branch, in the northern cardinal at the feeder, in the American robin on the lawn, your name is on the list. On the right side of it, tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed a bird react to someone else in your yard differently than it reacts to you, a visitor, a child, a neighbor? I had a blue jay last spring that would sit calmly while I filled the feeder every morning. But the second my neighbor walked through the gate, it was gone before he even touched the latch. I've never forgotten that. Tell me what happened in your yard. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.